Bonserrant, the president and CEO of Ardent Hospitality, is here. They run Picasso's and a number of other properties here. Glad to have him. Oh, okay, let's... we have Rajesh Melwani of Aegis, a prominent BPO employer here. Charlie Rufino of the Net Group. Many people know that, become quite a prominent developer here. Eric Nielsen, the regional head of Regis, is here. Where's Eric? There he is. Nice fellow. Finn Poulsen beside him with the Vestas operation. This is one of the world's largest, or I think it is the world's largest wind power organizations. Yes. We have Vince Padilla of Paddy's Point. I'm sure many people, yeah, a favorite of many people. Carlo Jose of HSBC, senior SVP of Operations, is here. Yes, there we are back there. We have Danny Ignacio, the president and COO of Eaton. Where's Danny? There he is. Nice to have him. We have Paul Harmiston of RCBC Plaza. The GM, I think, is his title. Where's Paul? He's kind of shy, maybe. There he is. We're at the back. Eric Mango Singh of Philam Properties is here, the president of that organization. Yes, glad to have Eric. We have David Caldwell here of Wells Fargo. This is another big growing BPO operation. I'm not sure where David is. Rahul Singh is here of American Express. Where's Rahul? There he is, near the back. Klaas Oriel. Where's Klaas? There he is, runs PBSP now. Formerly ran the Alcatel operation here. We have Evan McBride and Mike Russell of KGL doing big development for Philippines up in the Clark area, among other things. Among many other things, I should say. We have Miguel Garcia is here of DTSI. There's Miguel. Yes. Rene Kizan is here. A couple people from Point West. Are they? Well, they're usually here. They're nice people. No, a prominent local BPO operation. They're usually always here. Okay, we have Harry John of Skyrise Development in Cebu. Quite a prominent Cebu developer is here. A number of different businesses as well. Who else we have here? Okay, we have some nice people from the Northgate Orinzo operation. Darcy Lalonde and Mike Ellis. This is a prominent BPO organization owned by Colbert Kravis Roberts. If there's bankers in your table, they'll know who KKR is, and have established Philippines as their one of their global hubs, and they actually employ more people in Philippines than they do in any other country in the world. So I might almost call them a Philippine company, although they're not. And don't tell anybody I said that. But it's nice to have a prominent global organization. They're the largest HR systems organization with a very strong presence here. We have a good group here from PS Bank with the president, Pascal Garcia, is here as well. So nice to have them with us. We have Leonardo Argiles, the president of Unicapital Securities as well, is here. Pleasure to have him. We have our friends, of course, from PLDT Alpha Enterprise. As usual, a nice group. They always dress nice, so you can't miss them. Jovi Hernandez is here. Mitch Loxton is here. Jay Lugdamio is here. Risa is here. Yeah, so a nice group as always, showing their support and so forth for the business and the community here. Who else can we talk about here? Don Felbaum, my friend, Vice President of the American Chamber of Commerce, is here. Yes, okay, so I'll introduce our first speaker. His name is David Leechiu, and many people know him. A few years ago, he started his own operation called Leechiu and Associates, and became quite a prominent operation on the transaction side in real estate. Later joined, raised his profile, and JonesLang LaSalle found out about the organization and joined with him, or with his group, I should say. and they've now become quite a dominant player here. So for some who don't know, I was told not to give too much information about JonesLang. Alastair will talk more detail about that. But they are the largest real estate organization in the Asia region. And I know you're saying that, well, Richard, don't other people say similar things? But if you look at the transparent information, this is a New York Stock Exchange traded company. But if you look at their revenues and people employed, then that would clearly put them as a large operation. And within Philippines, they're quite a dominant player, as many people, as most of you know. So David said not to say too much, so I won't say too much, David. I don't know what else to say, but he's, by his own, by my description, he gives extremely analytical and useful information. Now, he would say he's not an evangelical speaker, but he gives amazingly good information. So please welcome David Leechiu to the stage, and glad to have David.
Thank you. Richard, thank you very much for the very generous introduction, and thank you very much for having us over here and for taking the time to listen to what we have to say about the property market. I'm going to start off with the local property sector and leading into Alastair's presentation about the region and what's going on in Asia Pacific. So if you can just have the next slide. I'd like to start off with the office market overview and let you know what's going on with the rents and capital values. This is a map of Metro Manila, of what it is today. For those who are new to the Philippines, we have built about 20 business districts in the last 10 years. It's an unprecedented level of development. We've never had this kind of development in our 100-year history. And rents. This is how rents have behaved in the last 12 months. Makati is trading between a low of 600 pesos per square meter to as much as 800, 900 pesos per square meter. And Bonifacio closing the gap with 600 to 800 pesos per square meter. And what's notable is that most of the lower price business districts, such as Quezon City, areas like Eastwood City and Ortigas and the Bay Area are also climbing up from a very low 300 pesos per square meter back in 2008 to where it is now, which is about, they're testing 500 to 600 pesos per square meter in rents. Next. This is how rents have behaved in the last 10 years and how we see it in the next 2 to 3 years. We had, from the Asian financial crisis in '97, we saw rents come down by 70%. The bottom of that was in 2003. In 2003, we had about, from 2003, we had about 6 to 7 years of rental bull run. And it's all because of one industry, the BPO industry. The BPO industry started to come to the Philippines in a meaningful way in 2002, and in 4 years wiped out all the stock that was produced in 1997 to 2000. And that 6-7 year bull run was clipped by not so much by the global financial crisis, so much the oversupply of office space that we produced, that developers produced in 2008 and 2009. One thing interesting about the Philippines is that it's one of maybe 2 countries where you did not see demand for office space contract. The other country, most likely, is India. These 2 countries did not see any contraction in office space demand. In fact, if we always theorize that if not for all the office space we built in 2008 and 2009, we wouldn't have seen rents come down that much. in 2009, between January till about July, we saw a slowdown in office space. A very, very few transactions happened during those few months. But as soon as the world stopped falling apart and started to stabilize, we had this tremendous flurry of office tenants come to the Philippines, starting July 2009 all the way till the end. And it more than made up for the slowdown in the first 5-6 months of 2009. We've had a very strong recovery in rents in 2010. Rents are up 30-40% in 2010, and we think it's going to keep going up for the next 9 months to 12 months, mainly because there's no stock in the market. There's no stock in the market today. And although there's quite a healthy pipeline of office space entering the market in the next 2 years, a lot of the stock is now being pre-committed 6 months before completion, mainly because of the amount of demand coming from the BPO industries. Now, the big question many have today is what's going to happen to this economy, and at least for the office sector, assuming global financial crisis round 2 happens, which, you know, with all the instability going on in the US and Europe, a lot of people are very anxious about that. We see that there is now a heightened sense of urgency for more companies to come to the Philippines because, you know, funnily enough, fortunately for the Philippines has become the part of an anti-crisis solution for many multinationals. Although it's predominantly come from the U.S., we are seeing traffic from Australia, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, and a lot of other English-speaking high-cost centers to the Philippines. And what is interesting is that a year ago when I first presented to this forum, about 9 global financial institutions are located in the Philippines. That list has now come up to about 12, Wells Fargo being the most recent addition to that list. And the amount of headcount that they're looking to set up in the Philippines is quite dramatic. 5 years ago, a BPO company would have a pilot project of 200 to 300 people. Those pilot project sizes are now in the range of 1,000 people. And so most of these companies have a ramp up of, you know, from 0 to 3,000 people in less than 3 years. And we're seeing more and more of this traction come to the Philippines across many companies from all industries, predominantly from finance and accounting related, banking related companies and insurance related companies. But what I could tell you is that you know, there are a very small neighborhood of companies from the U.S. that are hiring 400 to 1,000 people here, doing very odd things like layouts for newspaper ads, as one example. We've had another company that we're servicing, and all they do is do the program for the logos for T-shirts. And the program for the logos for T-shirts that go into the printers that stitch the logo on the T-shirt. And they're doing stuff like that here. Every architectural and engineering company that's locally based in the Philippines used to export talent to the Middle East, to the rest of Asia for work. Now they're servicing so many companies around the world, not just English language, but other languages, for engineering and architectural support work in the Philippines, and not just in Metro Manila, but other parts of the Philippines. So the office market is a very sensitive, supply-sensitive market. It's very easily oversupplied because of the amount of capital that developers have. We were probably the only outfit in 2006 in 2006 telling most of the developers to stop building office space because of the office supply they were producing in 2008 and 2009. So consequently, rents fell by 50% in 2009, made a very strong recovery in 2010. This chart shows you the running balance every year for the next 5 years, all throughout Metro Manila, just Metro Manila. So the excess stock produced in 2009 becomes the beginning balance for 2010. You add the new stock in 2010 for completion in 2010, and that's the full bar there, about 500,000 square meters of space. The blue line, horizontal blue line, is the demand line. 300,000 square meters of space taken up every year for the last 5 years. Crisis or no crisis, the demand for office space has been fairly consistent. We just project this as saying we don't have any growth for office demand, 300,000 square meters, and we'll hit equilibrium in 2015. The next slide will show you that in all likelihood, demand is going to grow by 20%. We see it now, it's already September, and we do see that in all likelihood, we're going to end the year with 360,000 square meters. Just to help you appreciate what 300,000 to 360,000 square meters is, the annual demand for Singapore office space is only 160,000 square meters a year. Of course, rental values in the Philippines is peanuts compared to Singapore. Singapore is about 7 to 8 times values in the Philippines, but many people are shocked by the amount of space taken up in the Philippines. So in all likelihood, equilibrium is actually going to happen much sooner. And although rents have come up 30%, 40% in the last 18 months, there's been just a little bit of a slowdown in the momentum of the rent of escalation, primarily because of 2 very large projects coming into the market. The first one is in Makati, and then the second one is in Fort Bonifacio called Net Lima. Net Lima is, we've got a slide, I think, for Net Lima coming up. This slide shows you a very quick snapshot of what Net Lima is about. It's about 54,000 square meters. It's the first true grade A office, prime office building quality in Fort Bonifacio. Many tenants have been waiting for a building of this quality, and it will be ready for occupancy by November, for fit out by November of this year, and occupancy by February of next year. So I'm going to move on to the residential sector. Sorry, I've got 5 more minutes. What's happening in the residential sector is that since the global financial crisis, land values in enclosed villages have gone up by as much as 100% in the last 2 years. All the capital that's left, all the Filipino capital that's parked in all the investment funds have now been repatriated, and a big chunk of that money is in the villages right now. So Forbes Park, Ordoneta Village, and Dasmariñas Village have all come up in value from, it's made its way from 50,000, 60,000 pesos in 2006, 2007, and it's worked its way out to about 130,000 pesos per square meter today. As a consequence, all the other enclosed villages from as far off as Quezon City, Ayala Heights, all the way down to Ayala Alabang have gone up 70 to 100% in value. So Green Hills, Valle Verde, Green Meadows, they've all broken historical highs, and they're now trading between 60 to 90,000 pesos per square meter. Ayala Alabang has been sleeping for many years between 16 to 20,000 pesos a square meter, and now it's it's hit 55,000 pesos per square meter for golf course property, and for non-golf course property, about 37 to 40,000 pesos a square meter. And some of you might wonder what this is for. Well, it means that very soon rents in both the office sector and housing, especially the expat housing, is going to go up very quickly because the yields have now come down by half. So what used to be an asset producing 2%, 3% yield is now only producing less than 1% yield. So for those of you who are renewing the next 18 months, we'd be more than happy to help you through that process. Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't necessarily a direct plug, but next slide, please. Condominiums. Now, the biggest question asked of us is there going to be a glut in the condominium space? And we think no. This slide shows you what we built from 1999 to the first half of 2011 on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is what we're producing in the next 5 years. So from 73,000 units, we are producing 107,000 new units in the next 5 years. And much of this, about 97% of the stock is mid-end. What is mid-end? That is anything less than 10 million pesos. 10 million pesos being less than about 200,000 US. We don't think there's going to be a glut in the condominium sector because, number one, for the last 5 years, everyone has underestimated the demand from this sector. If you just consider that Metro Manila has a daytime population of 14 million, a nighttime dormant population of about 10 million, it's one of the largest cities in the world, you just have to ask yourself, what kind of living conditions do the middle class have today? It's very poor. And the way to see that, to appreciate that, is that as soon as you get out of Makati CBD, the rest of Makati looks pretty un-Makati. If you look at the rest of Taguig, outside Fort Bonifacio, the rest of Taguig is pretty undeveloped. The entire Manila, the entire Pasay, the entire Pasig City outside Ortigas Center all looks the same. And it's like that all throughout the country, all throughout the city. So this middle class population that's been living in the same housing conditions for the last 30 years, their household income has probably gone up by 2 times, by 3 times. And they're 10 years older, they're 20 years older, they're all looking for some semblance of independence and some semblance of independence, and they also want to upgrade their housing conditions. There's also been this whole talk about urban renewal. Urban renewal was something that we all talked about in 1995. The big difference between 1995 and today, the big game changer is interest rates. Interest rates back then were double digit, 12 to 18%. In the case of 2001, interest rates were up to 18%. And today they're single digit, low single digit. And it's probably going to stay low single digit for quite a while. So that's afforded a lot of developers to pass that benefit down to the buyers. The buyers now have affordable housing. The banks, I could say, from what I've heard from many third parties, have still been very strict, very consistent with their lending. They've not been reckless. And I think what we just went through in 2008 and 2009 has been a very strong reminder for them. There is a big shakeout in the residential condo industry, primarily coming from one brand called SMDC. SMDC, those billboards you'll know very well, have gone from 0 to 4 billion, more or less 3.5 to 4 billion is their latest forecast, publicly announced forecast for the year end. 4 billion net of tax income. You don't go from 0 to 4 billion without carving significant market share from the other developers and without growing a market, an untapped market yourself. I'm going to skip these slides now to go to one more. Okay, retail. Retail is a pretty boring, not boring, but very straightforward industry. There are only 3 players. SM dominates heavily, 7.7 billion after-tax income last year, pesos. And what's interesting to many people is that of the top 12 malls in the world, 4 are SMs. 3 in Metro Manila and 1 in Cebu. And each of these malls are 400,000 to 500,000 square meters in size, and with a daily foot traffic, workday foot traffic of 400,000 people. It can climb up to 600,000 people on a weekend. If Justin Bieber is there, if Paris Hilton or Black Eyed Peas is there, then the traffic can climb up to 800, a million people. So, which is, shocks many people who live in smaller towns in the U.S. or Australia, for example. Lastly, we are really a very strong believer of tourism, what's going to happen in this country with tourism. And not so much because we're doing many things right. I think that's hoping too much, maybe. But because the demand for tourism is so significant. And the next slides will show you. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. So 940 million travelers throughout the world, and up close to 900 billion spent in tourism traffic. Okay, and the Philippines picked up 30% of 1% of that. And of the tourist count, 37% of 1%. It's, we're literally not in the map. Statistically, we're not in the map. The demand is there, the product is there, the problem is how to get here. It's so difficult to get here. And you'll see that these are the top destinations in Asia where 240 million travelers happen. Excuse me. So 204 million people travel throughout Asia, and we're getting so little traffic from that. Why are we optimistic? Because number one, we are opening a number of airports in the next 3 years. Primarily the one of Boracay that will allow large airplanes to fly through. And second, we're opening more and more airports throughout the country, and hopefully the next piece will be the open skies. When will open skies happen? We're really, that's up to Cebu Pacific and PAL. When will the international airport be upgraded? This one, and go to NAIA 3? Don't have the answer. But despite all these issues, I think there's going to be significant growth in tourism. There's one slide that we would really like to show you if we could, that will show you why we are optimistic, not bullish, but optimistic. And that is maybe the last slide that I'll end with this slide. This slide shows you the growth in the BPO industry, which some of you have seen from a year ago. The BPO industry employed less than 1,000 people in 2001. Today, they're employing 530,000 people. 530,000 people. In all likelihood, it's going to end this year with 650,000 people. In 3 years, it will be 1 million plus. Today, it's contributing $10 billion US. As of 2010, $10 billion US to the economy. It's probably going to climb to 15 billion in the next 3 years. That's the other leg of the economy today. The first leg being the overseas remittances, which we all know is trading between 18 to 25 billion US dollars. This is now 50% of the remittances in size and contribution. Here's another thing to think about. The BPO industry is now employing 530,000 people. The average salary is about 20 to 25,000 pesos. That's 12 billion pesos every month, just being flushed into this economy, straight into this economy. And these people so far have no concept of saving, no concept of investing for the future. They're all living for the day, partly because their parents allow them to, and partly because their bosses allow them to. And maybe that's something, we all have to think about. But it's all going straight to consumers spending, like malls, cell phones primarily, noodle cups primarily, Starbucks primarily, Sogo coupons primarily. Tourism, again, is we're not in the radar, but the demand is there. The country's opening up, and we're fairly optimistic. And what you can't see below the screen, is for the last 10 years, all the excuses why people will not invest here or come here. So every single bombing, every single locust or mosquito infestation, every kidnapping, every terrorist activity, every coup d'etat, every political scandal, every even the bus incident in Luneta a few months ago. And despite all that, tourism numbers are up and the BPO investments are dramatically up. This administration will not have those issues. And that's going to be a big plus for, and you can see from the goodwill that many the foreign community have for the Philippines, and this administration has been awesome. So that's all going to translate to what we think will be an optimistic, not yet bullish, future for this country. And with that, I'd like to turn over to Richard again. Thank you very much.
Very good. And as I said in my email, these will be downloadable, I hope.
Yes,
yes, and there'll be a lot of demand for it. But I'll welcome Alastair Hughes to the stage. Alastair has been in the running the Asia region for JonesLang LaSalle since 2008. Previously, he was managing director of their UK operations, then oversee the EMEA, the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region, which is a large, important region for any organization, of course. And then with impeccable timing, decided to come to run the Asia region in 2008. So you could conceivably make a compelling argument to say that Alastair is one of the most senior real estate managers in or on the planet. So no, I think that's reasonable. So please welcome Alastair Hughes, the CEO of Asia for JonesLang LaSalle.
Just in case the technology goes wonky, I've brought some bits of paper so I can refer to them. David, thanks very much. That was brilliant. I obviously can't go into that much detail because I'm talking about Asia Pacific as a whole, but I just wanted to put David's comments into context in terms of where the Philippines sits in the region. It's not that easy to do because I was speaking to an American journalist last week who was in America, and he said, "So tell me about the Asia Pacific property market." And I went through kind of blow by blow what was going on in the different parts, and he interrupted me after about 5 minutes and said, "Shit, Alastair, that's dull. Is it boom or bust?" Which is quite hard to do because at the moment there are some markets that are nearly booming and there are some markets which are pretty much busting. So the one thing that's consistent is that we're kind of busy everywhere trying to help people out. In terms of what we are in Asia Pacific, 13 countries, 80 offices and over 21,000 people, pretty much in every commercial centre in the region. We are known for two things. One is advising landlords and developers and governments in terms of their commercial real estate needs, transactions, so filling up empty buildings, and also for advising some of the biggest corporate occupiers in the world and in Asia Pacific. Here's just one snapshot of our corporate clients who we advise. What's really been a big trend in our business, in JonesLang LaSalle's business over the last couple of years, is if I put this slide up 3, 4, 5 years ago, it would all have been Western companies. We've made a big focus over the last few years to get involved with Asian domestic companies, and that's paying great dividends for us because Asian companies are beginning to outsource in the same way as Western companies were. So you see there are companies like DBS, Sanyo, Sony, and others who are using us much more extensively than they did before. We're talking to companies like this. I know some of you are in the room all day, every day about their real estate needs, and that hopefully gives us a little bit of insight in terms of what corporates are thinking about in terms of their future intentions, and that's what I want to try and impart to you today. So in kind of summary, what's going on? There is relatively strong economic growth in this part of the world, as you know. That is sustaining quite good levels of tenant demand in most markets. Vacancy levels are gradually falling away, even though there's quite a lot of development stock in the pipeline. And there's lots of money washing around the system. Despite what we hear on CNN and read in the Financial Times, there's a lot of money out here, which is supporting capital prices. So I'm quickly going to cover Asia-Pacific as a region, office rents, where they are today and where we think they're going, and capital values, the same, and some of the likely trends over the next little while as far as we can gather. So rental trends. Any belief that Asia-Pacific was going to be decoupled from the rest of the world when the global financial crisis hit was found to be a myth. You can see that almost in perfect harmony, each of the three regions in terms of office rents, and this is an index, everything equaling 100 back in 2006, everything fell in almost perfect harmony. No part of the world was immune from the global financial crisis. So rents peaked in 2007, 2008, and troughed sometime in the middle of 2009. In slightly more detail, this is showing the major markets in Asia-Pacific from bottom of the market after the GFC to today, what's happened. And I can't go into all the different information there, but just a couple of the outliers. You can see that Hong Kong has sprung back at a heck of a rate. Rents are up by 60% since the bottom of the market in the middle of 2009. That's caused by two things. One, Chinese companies seeing Hong Kong as a gateway to the rest of the world, foreign companies seeing Hong Kong as a gateway to China, and a little rock with very little supply. So lots of demand, very little supply, and rents have are growing very, very quickly. At the other extreme, you've got Tokyo, where rents have fallen quite dramatically from the peaks, and really haven't begun to recover at all. We thought they were going to nudge up a little bit this year, and then we had the earthquake and all that, and now they're still falling, and we think they'll probably keep falling next year. So quite an extreme, different thing going on, which is why it's hard to sum up in terms of boom or bust. Another thing to bear in mind is that from the peak back in 2007, where are we today? Rents have recovered in most markets, but we're still well off the rental levels going back to 2007. So even in places like Singapore, where rents have begun to recover, rents are still half of what they were in 2007, 2008. Half. And in Tokyo, roughly half as well. And if you look at those two markets, Tokyo and Singapore, for different reasons. Singapore, it's because there's lots of supply coming through. And in Tokyo, it's because there's no demand. So this is where we are in terms of rents today, as we look at them here today. And there you can see the competitive advantage that Manila has when talking about the BPO sector, etc. Look at the difference between Manila rents today and Hong Kong. Even if you look at the difference between Manila and some of the Indian prime cities, it's quite significantly different. And there's a huge range of different rental dynamics going on in each of these Asian markets. So looking forward, there are a couple of things that drive where rents go. One is supply, and the other is demand. Firstly, looking at supply. These figures I'm about to put up express supply as net additional Grade A stock between now and 2013. So if you look at an extreme version, Delhi, if there were 100 square meters of prime offices in Delhi today, by the end of 2013, there'll be 181. So almost doubling in terms of office stock. Now, boy, do they need it. I've spent a lot of time in Delhi over the last couple of years, and the average office building is really pretty bad. So a lot of this is upgrading, but also a surging economy. So lots of supply in places like Mumbai and Delhi. And then you can see the contrast with Hong Kong, with only 5% added to its net quality stock over the next 2 or 3 years, and a whole lot of demand. That's why rents are going up so quickly. Here in Manila, David's been through it, we think about a third growth over the next couple of years. So quite a lot of construction going on, quite a lot of supply coming through the system. There was a pause in new starts in 2009, so the supply that's coming through is stuff that started in 2008 or has started subsequently. Demand. Demand is largely driven by economic growth. There's a very strong correlation between what's going on in the economy of a market and what happens to space demand. And Richard mentioned it. I feel very privileged to be in this part of the world. This is the right place to be right now. If you look at the dotted line, that is not our view of economic growth, but a company we use called IHS Global Insight, who are a forecasting house. They believe that, on average, 2011-2012, Europe and the US will grow at about just over 2%. As the news evolves, that might be looking a little bit optimistic. But if you look at the main markets in Asia-Pacific, growth is much, much higher than that. In some markets, growth looks like it's going to come off a little bit next year, economic growth. Take China. In other markets, they think it's going to go ahead a little bit. Take India. Japan, obviously, this economic house think there's going to be a bounce back post the earthquake and whatnot. But if you take the overall message from this, obviously, that Asia-Pacific is growing much, much faster than the West, and that is supporting tenant growth and therefore tenant demand for space. This is office demand. This is take-up of buildings in Asia-Pacific. And you can see in 2001, 2002, it was very low. Then gradually, more and more businesses took space through to 2007. And in the first half of 2008 in Asia-Pacific, it was still pretty healthy. But then, of course, at the back end of 2008, it collapsed. So 2008 in aggregate was down a bit from 2007. And then 2009, one full year just about of pretty low activity. Picked up at the end, but pretty low activity throughout the whole of 2009. And at that point, when we were talking to our corporate clients, it was an absolute freeze. Even if we presented the best deal in the world, what we were being told was that head offices said, no moves, no capital spend, we're doing nothing. That is not the message we're getting today, thankfully. So you can then see the recovery in confidence and activity in 2010. And we believe, and I'll come on to the reasons why we believe this in a minute, that quite high levels of demand will be maintained over the next few years. Which is good news, because this black line is vacancy rates, if you aggregate Asia-Pacific. And you can see vacancy fell dramatically for 2007, just at the same time as there was loads of demand. Hence, rents went flying through the roof. Then vacancies went up just as demand went down. That's why rents fell very quickly. And now we're in pretty much equilibrium with quite high demand and that pipeline coming through that we went through earlier. So this is our famous property clocks. I like to call it the tumble dryer, and you'll see why in a minute. This looks at... Can you go back, please? Right, that's 2009, and you can see that most markets were falling. Either quickly or not so quickly, but nonetheless, each market was in rental decline. If you go forward, please. Second quarter of 2010. We've never experienced markets moving so quickly as this. Most markets had moved round the cycle, and some markets were beginning to grow. And if you look at it today, virtually all markets are now on the up. The ones that are not on the up are Seoul, where there's a massive oversupply and quite lackluster demand. Kuala Lumpur, where there's massive oversupply. Bangkok's about to move into growth, and Tokyo just because of the economic malaise in Japan. Global financial crisis, part 2. I hope not. It's not much fun when that happens. We all know that, and we know that it will have an effect on Asia-Pacific. There's no doubt about that in terms of corporate demand falling. But what we're detecting from our clients and what our research would suggest is that Asian companies will continue to grow. More so this time than last time because of increased domestic demand. Secondly, multinational corporates want to get in on the growth in Asia-Pacific. And when they're sitting in their head office in London or Amsterdam or New York or wherever it is, the last thing they want to cut is their growth plan for China or India or Southeast Asia. They're much more likely to cut investment plans for the Western economies. So I think that there's bound to be an impact, but it might be slightly mitigated for that reason. And then thirdly, as David mentioned, every single CFO in the world right now is looking at their bottom line. They're not quite sure what's going to happen to revenue, but so they're looking very, very carefully at cost. And anything they can do to increase efficiencies, including BPO, is very, very high on the agenda, even in some companies who wouldn't even have dreamt of it a couple of years ago. So that's going to be good for Asia Pacific as well. So rental values, what do we think is going to happen? That's rents today. During the course of this year, this is what's going to happen to rents. If you press one more time, to be a bit more explicit about it, Hong Kong, even though it's the most expensive office accommodation in the world, we think will grow by another 24% this year. Tokyo, unfortunately, is going to fall and will fall again next year. Singapore up a bit. Seoul down because of oversupply. Manila, we think, will grow at a fairly sustainable 10%. Capital values. Some people are making a lot of money, and some people are losing money in terms of investors buying real estate. This shows what happened around the world post the global financial crisis. Slightly different turning points in terms of the capital markets. Asia Pacific held up longer and then fell, and didn't fall as fast, because as soon as things looked reasonably good value, what happened was a very clear trend. In 2006 and 2007, we were selling buildings to private equity funds run from principally America. When things started to look a little bit cheap, we were selling for those people to Asian investors, Indonesian tin merchants and Malaysian rubber barons at about 60 cents in the dollar. So they were buying wisely in the period in 2009. So a floor was found to the market because of the net wealth in this part of the world. And since then, there's been a gradual increase in Asia Pacific and quite a sharp increase in the Western world. That's it in aggregate, but if you break it down into what's going on in Asia Pacific, there's obviously very marked different trends. The Hong Kongese desire to invest in commercial property, some would say speculate in commercial property, has driven that market to very high levels. So since the bottom of the market, capital values of commercial property have more than doubled in the last 18 months. Whereas if you look at Tokyo, they're still way down. Well, so 3% up from the very, very bottom of the market. So basically bouncing along the bottom, and Hong Kong heading for the moon, and everywhere else somewhere in between. But if you look at if you're looking at capital gains in Shanghai and Singapore and of that degree, 90 to 38%, and don't forget people are borrowing money to make these purchases. Some people are making a lot of money out of commercial real estate, have done since the global financial crisis. And different from rents, some markets have gone beyond the peak. So what this is telling us is that in Hong Kong, values are now about 50% higher than they were at the top of the market in 2007. Shanghai, about 20% up on the bottom of the market. Other markets still not quite there, but catching up pretty quickly. Manila, we think, is now back to where it was. So if that's where it was at the top of the last cycle, it's back there now. Tokyo, values of commercial real estate still half of what they were at the peak of the last cycle. So very different things happening in different markets. Who are the buyers making these decisions? Well, there's three types of buyers. High net worth individuals in Asia Pacific, corporates. There are many companies in this part of the world who are flush with cash, and sometimes it makes an awful lot of sense to buy rather than rent. And funds, both Asian funds and Western funds. Just a couple of examples. The high net worth population in Asia Pacific has absolutely multiplied dramatically over the last few years. You can read that for yourself. High net worth wealth up 31%, 332 billionaires in 2011 versus 79 in 2001. And these are now increasingly becoming our clients, buying big chunks of shiny commercial real estate in the capital centres of Asia Pacific. We recently acted for a private Indonesian buyer to buy a big chunk of office building in London, £288 million. And we recently sold a building in Singapore to a Malaysian company. So that's a couple of examples. In terms of corporate occupiers, You can see the statistics there. Many companies are looking at buying in rather than renting. They can see values going up and up and up, and it's not a bad way to lock money if you've got cash on your balance sheet. Some of the Shanghai World Finance Center came to the market last year, and 5 floors were sold to the people who occupied those floors at about $40 million a floor. And in net terms, there are more corporates buying than selling, but there are some corporates taking advantage of these capital markets to do sale and leasebacks as well. And this is one we just finished, a data center for IBM in Japan. Richard explicitly asked me to put a residential slide in. Most of what we do is commercial, but for most people personally, residential is very interesting because everybody either owns or aspires to own an apartment or a home. This is what's happened. You can see a big ride up to the global financial crisis, then a very sharp correction, and then a very sharp recovery. And now what's going on, if you look at the numbers to the left there, is that rate of growth is generally slowing down for various reasons. One of which is that central governments are trying to make it slow down in some of the bigger markets, particularly China, who looked what happened in America with the subprime mortgage crisis and over-leverage, looked what was happening in their own backyard and thought, yikes, and are beginning to try and moderate it, as are people in Singapore, as is the government in Singapore, as are the government in Hong Kong. So growth is beginning to come off, but a very, very healthy market nonetheless. This is back to commercial property. One of the gauges of the health in the market is how much trading is going on, how many willing buyers, willing sellers at known prices is happening. You can see that volumes peaked out at 121 billion back in 2007 and then fell by half in 2009 when sellers were here and buyers were there and they couldn't agree on where prices were. What happened was that some sellers had to come down, some buyers got a little bit more confident, and then the market began to find a level again, and that's when volume started to pick up again in 2010. The 2011 figure is only half of this year, so it's the first 6 months. We were predicting that it would be 100 billion this year, i.e. better than last year. We think it still will be, although Japan, which is by far the biggest capital market in the region, has absolutely collapsed in terms of trading due to the uncertainties there in Q2. But we still think it will be over 85, perhaps 90, 95 billion. This is slightly more specific. Again, this is volume, so this is how many deals are being done. Some very different things going on here. China, volumes are up dramatically. Lots of buyers and sellers being active in their market. Japan, you can see there a massive slowdown in the amount of deals being done, largely because of the uncertainties caused by the events earlier in the year. Yep. So what do we think are going to happen to capital values? Capital values, theoretically, should move perfectly in line with rental values. But they don't always, because there are some other drivers. One is sentiment, in terms of buyers and what they want to pay. The other is, can they get money? Can they borrow money? What's the cost of that money? And what do they anticipate is going to happen to rents? So sometimes rents grow at 10%, but capital values are flat. Other times rents are flat and capital values grow at 10% because of all those different dynamics, as I'm sure you all know. This is what we think is going to happen to capital values this year. One more time, please. We think that, again, Hong Kong, there's a lot of money there. There's Chinese money, there's Western money, and there's a lot of Hong Kong money. And rents are growing, and people are still predicting that rents will continue to grow. So we think that, again, that market's going to surge. That has to come to an end sometime. I don't know when, but I've been in commercial real estate for 23 years in lots of different parts of the world, and there's something about Hong that smells a bit bubbly at the moment. But I don't know. Tokyo, there's a lot of people saying that Tokyo looks pretty good value at the moment. You can go and buy really good quality real estate there for yields above the cost of borrowing, sometimes significantly above the cost of borrowing. If you take a very long-term view, it looks pretty dismal, but if you take a 5-year view, it's one of the markets that we actually quite like. partly because the world is really, really yearning for yield at the moment, and Japan real estate supplies bond-type yields. Manila, we think, will grow roughly in line with rents by about 9%, sold down because the dynamics in the office market are pretty horrible. That's that. So summary outlook, I'm done. You all know that Asia Pacific is growing faster than the West, which is great news for us. We think that demand will be sustainable. We're not naive, we're not stupid, and we're not peddling a story. We know that if there's a major correction in the West, it will affect us all out here. But we also think there are some pretty sound reasons why it won't be as bad as it was last time, because there are certain fundamental reasons why companies want to be here in Asia Pacific. One trend that I haven't really talked about is that occupiers, driven by their CFOs and CEOs, want to grow in Asia Pacific, but they want to grow efficiently. Nobody has forgotten yet the lessons of the excess of 2007, and we're spending a lot of time at the moment with companies trying to help them work out how to grow, but not necessarily grow their footprint. What people are realizing, partly with our help, is that if you look at an average office building at any time, half of it is empty. Because there's people out selling, or they've popped out for a coffee, or there's an awful lot of empty desks. And the days of everybody having a desk and their own computer, etc., we think are probably on the way out, because it's massively inefficient. So we're developing different techniques to help people occupy their space as efficiently as possible. And that efficiency thing is a key driver. Efficiency and productivity in terms of density of occupation, in terms of where people occupy, in terms of where they locate their back offices, is a huge part of the dialogue at the moment within the corporate world. There's no doubt that what we had been projecting in terms of rental growth 3 months ago, we have revised down a little bit because of the uncertainties in the West, but we do think the rents are going to continue to grow. Supply, even though there are buildings being developed, supply is being gradually chipped away by all this take-up and demand that's going on, and slightly edging towards a landlord's market. In 2009, a tenant could basically dictate the terms to the landlord, and often we were complicit in that. Now, landlords can just say no, knowing that there's a good chance that another tenant will come along. We do think there might be a pause in investment volumes in Q3, Q4, but we still think there'll be more deals done than there were in last year. Definitely investors are looking at defensive stock much more. All investors have become more risk averse. So in our world, defensive stock means good quality buildings in good locations let to nice tenants. If you're in a slightly off location, or you've got a tenant that you're not sure if they can pay the rent, or you've got a big void, or if there's something else wrong with the building, it's actually very difficult to sell right now because nobody wants to take the risks. They want solid, good quality properties with a slight tendency towards retail and logistics, which is a gamble on the fundamentals of Asia Pacific economies, rather than offices. But that's only just a slight preference. Generally speaking, defensive stock is what people are after. And there's a huge amount of money around. We're selling a portfolio of logistics units at the moment in Japan, $1.4 billion, and we had 10 bids. And 5 bids were all around about the price we need to get. So there's a lot of money out there. And that's one of the reasons we think volumes will increase again in 2012 and 2013. There are too many reasons for people to do things in the capital markets. There are people who raised funds 3 years ago. Those funds have generally got a 5-year life, so they'll need to sell. There are some banks who are underwater. You know, they may not be talking about it, but they are underwater. And as capital values grow, they'll reach the trigger point where they'll pull the plug and put the thing on the market. So there's reasons why people will sell, and there's a lot of reasons for people to buy. There's a lot of money out there looking for a safe home, and commercial real estate, particularly in inflationary times, is often a very good thing to do with your money. So we believe that Asia Pacific will be a good medium-term bet. There may be bumps on the road, there always is, but we reckon the shape of it will be like this. And if you've got the holding power to see your way through the wee bumps, I think people will do pretty well. Thank you very much.
Could I ask David Leechiu as well to the stage for some questions? Perhaps I'll ask the first question for David when he comes up. Here, as Alastair would know, this business process outsourcing is a big deal, and I go on about it, and many others do. Is there a movement, much of the...
And the balance spread throughout the Philippines. The reason we think this way is that 50% of the graduates of the entire country come from 2 hours north and 2 hours south of Metro Manila by car.
Did everybody hear that, I hope? Yeah? Okay, a question we have right here. Maybe go to that microphone there, please. Yeah, thank you. Good.
If you could just touch on the local hotel scene here, as you had a slide, but you didn't really get to touch on it.
Yeah. So we're seeing about close to 9,000 hotel rooms under construction for completion in the next 3 years, and predominantly 4- and 5-star hotels. So, and predominantly in Metro Manila only. So if the tourism numbers for that particular product don't rise in sync with that, then we're going to have some of the cheapest hotel rooms, 4- or 5-star hotel rooms in the region. And at the moment, they're not cheap compared to the region. Where we think there is real need for the hotel sector is all the 2- to 3-star hotels throughout the country in the 4 trading cities throughout the country, because there aren't any. Very limited quality, so that market is underserved. The best example I can give you is from Ortigas Center to Clark, there isn't any quality hotels, 3- 4-star. There isn't a hotel that you can check in without anybody wondering what you're doing in that hotel. Between Ortigas Center to Clark, and the same from Clark to Baguio, from Baguio to Lawag. And it's the same south and the same throughout the country.
Yeah, very true. Other people are thinking of questions. Maybe I'll ask one more for Alastair. But your slides were a little bit depressing for Philippines, if I can say. We're at the lower end of the. But are there other markets where perhaps there's similarities in between Philippines and I don't know, Malaysia, India, or so forth, that we might watch to follow along of what happened there and what might also happen here, or is it too unique a market because of the BPO industry and so forth?
I'm sorry if they were depressing. They weren't meant to be. The only people who it's depressing for potentially are developers. But on the other hand, you can buy land that reflects the office rent, so the margins are exactly the same. When rents in Singapore fell after the global financial crisis in the first half of 2009, they fell by further and faster than anywhere else in the world. They fell by 60% in 6 months. The local and anybody who owned property there wasn't very happy about it. Developers weren't particularly happy about it. But the government was absolutely delighted because they think that increases the competitiveness of Singapore, who compete head-on with Hong Kong. And we're now talking to companies who would naturally gravitate towards Hong Kong, but are looking at Singapore as an alternative because the cost of office accommodation and housing and everything else is just much, much more compelling in Singapore. So I think it is a serious competitive advantage for the Philippines economy to be able to offer good quality office space at levels which are at a discount to some of the competing countries and markets. If you look at what's happened in places like Bangalore and Chennai, there does come a point where the market's become very successful. Land that is easy to be converted into BPO space becomes very hard to get, and then you get the classic dynamics of demand and supply, and rents begin to rise quite rapidly. So there's nothing unique about the BPO market in that rents can and do rise once the market's at a certain level.
Okay, so that's a good point. So on this key industry like BPO, we still have a strong situation ahead, especially because of the real estate sector. Questions? Well, we're shy today? Okay, I'll ask one more mischievous question, maybe of David. David, talked that the condo market is a very strong market, and it does seem very exciting. So many towers going up, and they're sold, many of them pre-sold, and so forth. But when the sign goes up that they're fully occupied or fully sold, oftentimes you don't see many lights on in the building at night. And are many of these owned by investors who, or how does that dynamic work, David?
The 60 to 70% of the condo market, especially in the mid-end, is coming, the buyers are all coming from abroad, OFWs, who primarily are romanticized with the idea of retiring here. And after 3 months, they realize, hey, you know, I can't stand the traffic, I can't stand the heat, I can't stand my relatives anymore. So at some point, that sentiment's going to turn from, you know, I want to buy so I own and use in the few weeks that I'm here a year, to being an investment where they lease property. The other reason why some of these condos are still vacant or unoccupied, even though the whole building is complete, is because half the time the buyers are looking for financing, or they haven't finished their full payment, and so the units have not been turned over because of the financing, the stretch financing provided by developers. The second reason is that the buyers themselves refuse to accept the units because of the shabby completion and finishing of these units. So there's always that clash between the buyers and the sellers. And not all developers are like that, but there are a few, you know, a few that are like that.
Very good. No? Okay. They're sociable guys, so please come on up and... okay. Mike Turville has a question.
Hi, good morning. Actually, can I just ask an extension question really with regards to the condos? I don't know whether, A, you would tell us which developers you recommend. And the second one is, what would you buy? Would you buy a studio? Would you buy a one-bedroom? Would you buy a two-bedroom as an investment? What is going to give the best yield?
I will answer some of it and qualify some of it. So, first is that I think the best value for money are still down to the first 9 key condos, the existing ones. So if you're looking to either invest as a passive investment or as a user, I think the first 9 buildings that I'm going to enumerate provide very good value. So the first 4 are from Rockwell. So the first 4 condos that Rockwell put up 12 years ago. So that's Luna, Amorsolo, Hidalgo, and Rizal. Still provide the best value in the market because they're reasonably priced. And the volume of transactions in Rockwell is unmatched anywhere else. You blink, you lose the deal. You keep the unit vacant, it will be occupied or bought fairly quickly, more than any other place. The other buildings are Pacific Plaza Towers in Bonifacio, One Ross Triangle, Essenza, and Regent Parkway. So those 9, and one McKinley Place in Fort Bonifacio, and maybe Fairways Towers, primarily because of the quality, the location, and the price that they're trading at now is the same, if not just slightly higher, than all the pre-selling condos in the market for quality that you can never repeat again. Because they're really high spec, and they were built at a time when there was a very big boom in the mid-90s. And so the specs of these buildings were much, much higher than the products being done today. And where would I as a local, I think, as a local able to buy, thank you, as a local able to buy property, landed property, and I'm not saying that foreigners can't still buy landed property, but it's just a matter of creativity, I guess. But as a local who's able to buy landed property, the enclosed villages are still the best assets. So every enclosed village from Ayala Heights all the way down to Alabang, to Southvale, to Alabang Hills, Ayala Alabang, because the supply is so tight. It's so tight. How tight is it? If you add up all the households in these villages, plus all the high-end condos that I enumerated, plus the entire apartment ridge on Ayala Avenue, all the units of Rockwell, with all those buildings there, all the units in 1, 2, 3 Salcedo, so basically all the high-end units in Metro Manila, the total household number is about 25,000 only. Okay, 25,000 households that you could consider to be the upper market, the luxury market, and these are units where, you know, a typical unit in Pacific Plaza is 35, 37, 40 million pesos, so almost $1 million. A typical house today in Forbes and Dasma is 3 million US, no financing, no debt, all cash. So, and that's a small house, and with hardly any consideration on the land value. So 25,000 households, assuming one household, one family. And you add another 10 to 15% of that number for all the high-end families in the provinces from Cebu, Clark, Batangas, and there are very few outside the core cities. That's going to give you a number of, let's say, 30,000 households. And let's say that of these 30,000 households, you have 7 people per household, 7 family members per household. That's 2 parents and 5 kids. Okay, that's only going to get you to, what is that, 210,000 individuals that run this country. Really, because all the expats, all the top-level executives, all the local management, and all the taipans will live in one of these places. So that's how small that number is. The good thing is that you cannot grow the middle class without pushing up the upper class as well, because the upper class own everything that the middle class buy. And so as we grow the middle class, we are creating new wealth. We are pushing a lot of the middle class up to the upper class and upper class higher. And that's going to translate to even greater scarcity value for many of these assets. I hope that addressed your question. Thank you.
Extremely good answer to that question. Okay, we got one more. Name just left me. Please state your name.
Yes, thank you. Graham Gulliver. Question again for David, if I may. What is the level of interest with building owners and developers to put condominium space in offices on the market? So there's a very big rental market, obviously, but is there any interest there, and is there any supply coming online for foreign companies who want to buy a floor or a couple of floors in a building rather than an entire building? And what are the sort of political and regulatory constraints behind that?
Okay, so by law, foreigners can own up to 40% of a building, provided a building is a condominium corporation. So what they call a strata titled asset. So for example, they can buy as much as 40% of all the units in Rockwell, and they can own it freehold, meaning it's not a lease. And they can trade it freely to foreigners. The same with office buildings. It's just that for the last 12 years, well, the office market in the Philippines was predominantly strata titled units. So a lot of the rich families bought units, whether small or big or buildings, and then kept them. They hardly traded them, and they use it for rental income. But But for the last 12 years, that disappeared. The Asian financial crisis wiped that out. For the last 12 years, we've seen owner developers, single asset owners. But I think that's going to change again because right now with the level of capitalization, with the level of demand for the office market, many of the private investors and families are now investing back into the office market where the yields are fairly stable. You know, one benefit to investing in the office sector is that you only talk to your tenant once when you sign a deal, and you don't see him for the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, in the residential, you know, you buy a unit, the engagement is very, very high. You know, the oven breaks, you have to replace it. The ref breaks, you have to replace it. The carpet, the windows leak, you have to do something about it. In the office market, the tenant is the one investing in the unit, and all they want is use for the space.
Please go to the, if you can, just so everyone else can hear you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this is for David. We're looking to do a couple of BPO buildings in Quezon City around the Trinoma Mall. And I noticed that Quezon City has one of the lowest rentals. But I think the difference is that we're related to the rail because we also built the rail. Will that affect the rent? Do you think we can charge higher?
The office market is easily commoditized, so it's easily flooded and therefore easily commoditized. So it's really important when the building is finished. But today, there is no stock in the entire Quezon City outside Eastwood. So the timing is very critical. I think 2013 is a year when I think some good things can happen or some bad things can happen. And by that I mean it's today, this time, when developers will decide, will I build an office building? And if they do, they will complete in 2013 or 14. So those 2 years are susceptible to being flooded with office space. So we just have to watch when this building is going to be done. But Quezon City, very strong demand from the BPOs. It's become the second location priority for many of them.
Very good. I'm sure there's a lot more questions, and David has a lot of detailed information. Alastair more broad, of course. So please come on up and maybe talk personally about these things. But for recognition, I'll welcome Don Feldbaum of Optel Corp.
Thank you, Richard. I think at this point in time, we would like to give David and Alastair, on behalf of the Asia CO Forum, a small token of appreciation for the excellent performance that they did today. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Ooh. Pookie.
Gentlemen.
Wow, thank you very much.
I don't know what it is, but it looks interesting. Good job.
It's intriguing, isn't it?
Thank you, guys. You can sit down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to call up Mr. Jovi Hernandez, who's the head of PLDT's Alpha Enterprise for corporate relationships, for a raffle prize. Jovi?
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everyone. I think everyone was interested to find out whether those gifts were swords or French bread. What are those?
They're bazookas.
Okay. We'll be raffling off an iPad to the lucky winner, and this is the perfect device for you to access the material that was presented today. Just a disclaimer: these units self-destruct if you put a non-smart SIM. We're still hopeful that the Sun Cellular SIM will work in a couple of months.
Can I ask, is there anyone else who wants to put it in? Because someone is going home today with this iPad. So is anybody else? Let me just do a quick walk and see if there's any others. Okay, here we go. Jovi's going to pick.
Okay, the winner for the iPad today is from Eton Properties, Philippines, Mr. Erwin M. De Pedro. Erwin, I'll talk to you later because you're using a globe number. Just joking.
Congratulations and thank you very much from PLDT Alpha Enterprise for that. Okay, I'll welcome to Rebecca Bustamante, and then we'll close.
It's time for announcement after the fun. We would like to announce our HSCU Awards for nomination. Please go to our website and download the form. We have many categories like Executive Leadership Team of the Year Awards, Global Filipino Executive of the Year Awards, Expat Executive of the Year, HR Leadership Team of the Year, Finance Team Leadership Team of the Year, Technology Leadership Team of the Year, Sales and Marketing, and Lifetime Contributor Awards. Please go to our website at www.asia-ceo.org for nomination form. If you have some questions, please give us a call. Our phone number's there. And, can that show? The OBB? Yeah. Okay, so it's time. The deadline is October 21. So the sooner you send, your nomination would be the best. Who can nominate? You can nominate yourself. You can nominate your friends. You can nominate your company. It doesn't matter. Just send to us and we will go through the judges. We'll do the final. Okay? Thank you for coming. Hope to see you next month. Have a great morning.